Welcome back to Racing Rundown. This is the second preview that we have this week for you on the channel, and this is a preview of the Grade 1 Haskell, the big feature of this pretty good weekend of stakes races overall. Obviously, a lot of stuff at Monmouth, another week at Saratoga, opening weekend at Del Mar. It's a pretty strong weekend of stakes races overall, and this is obviously the big feature of this. We'll do the typical thing that we do on Racing Rundown, go through all the races, talk about everything, every single horse, excuse me, there, and I'll give you my readings for the race. We'll mention there is a preview on Racing Rundown of the Grade 1 Coaching Club American Oaks. You can check that out down below in the description. Episode number 168 of Racing Rundown, as well as this week's upcoming segment of Racing Rundown Around the World. We are going to be talking about the King George at Ascot. It's a race that I'm personally very excited for. With that being said, we're going to move on now to the first horse in the Haskell for this year, and that is Cyberknife, the winner of the Arkansas Derby. And Cyberknife, I'll just get into it right now. I do not like Cyberknife at all for this race. Cyberknife was a horse that I sold out against big going into the Kentucky Derby. I did not like any of the horses coming out of Arkansas, especially Secret Oath. I talked about that in the coaching club preview. I don't need to get into that any further, but I did not like any of the horses coming out of Arkansas, and Cyberknife ran pretty much how I thought he was going to run in the Kentucky Derby. Did not show up at all. He was up forwardly placed and got cooked by the pace there, so it was never going to work out for him. But even then, Cyberknife wasn't good enough in the Kentucky Derby. Dropped in class. He won the Matt win last time out on Belmont Stakes weekend, which was a good win for him. Very narrow photo. I'm still questioning to myself how he got the bob in the Matt win against Howling Time, but he did get the bob there, and he did get the benefit of the graded stakes win there. But again, more of the same from the Kentucky Derby with him. I just did not like, or from what I said about him going into the Kentucky Derby, I should say, I just did not like him in Arkansas, and I don't really think he's got any upside in here. Again, I think that this is a very one-dimensional race, much like the coaching club. So I am very against Cyberknife, like I am in most races where there are better horses than him on paper, and I'm going to take that stand against him because I don't really think he provides a whole lot in terms of ability to win this race. We're going to move on now to number 2, Taiba. This is just the race of horses I sold out big against in the Kentucky Derby, and Taiba was another one of those horses in the Kentucky Derby preview that I did not want any part of in there, but it was just because of the way that he was going into the Kentucky Derby. Now, the difference between Cyberknife and Taiba is I actually think Taiba's a good horse. Now, Taiba's thing is he had 2 very good victories, obviously going into the Kentucky Derby, one of those being a grade 1. The figures on those came back great, and if you're a figure person, he checks off all the boxes there. Massive step down in the Kentucky Derby, but kind of the same deal as Cyberknife, relatively forwardly placed, got cooked in there, and then you add the added factor of he only had 2 starts going into the Kentucky Derby, and that certainly was something that played a factor into his not being able to run very well in the Kentucky Derby. So you put all that together, and the Kentucky Derby is kind of a wash race for him, and that's the way I'm viewing it with Taiba here. But I just don't think that this is the best spot for Taiba to come back in. And he's coming in here, he's off the break. I don't like horses off of layoffs to begin with, and I don't like horses that are going to take, I mean, I I will say the morning line, Taiba's the morning line favorite right now. He's not going to be the post time favorite. Well, I'll get to what I have to say about Jack Christopher in a minute. But he's going to take too much money that he's going to take more money than I would be comfortable playing him at if I was going to take against Jack Christopher, play an angle, play one of the couple of angles out there that I think you can play against Jack Christopher. I'm giving away where I'm going to go in this race, but again, Taiba's a horse that until I think he needs a couple more races before I'm ready to take him big time. And that's my big read with Taiba. I don't think he's bad, and I think I think he needs time. That's the big thing with him is he needs time. Now we're going to move on to the number 3 horse in this race. That's Time Willard, the New Jersey bred for this race. He's a filler horse here. I'm not going to really sugarcoat it too much. He's not really adding too much to this race other than an extra horse in the post. He might have some kind of speed in this race. He might be a presence early on in here. He did show speed in a couple of his early races at Monmouth. And the one other thing I will mention about him, he has been sprinting, so this is a big step up in distance for him from 6 to 9 furlongs if you're going by his last race, and he doesn't add really anything to this race outside of, like I said, another horse in the gate. Not going to be doing anything with him. He, again, The one thing that he could do is go out there, be a pace presence, and burn out at about 7 furlongs into the race. And now we're going to move on to the number 4 horse in here, Howling Time for Dale Romans in this spot. Howling Time, I referenced it with Cyberknife. He had a very, very tough defeat in the Matt win at Churchill last start out for him. He had a good run in there. It was the first time that Howling Time had looked like a good racehorse in a very long time. And Howling Time had some very disappointing runs on the Kentucky Derby trail. And I thought that he could, at least be decent. I actually picked him back in the Kentucky Jockey Club, and his 2 runs this year left so much to be desired. Very disappointing effort in the Fountain of Youth, worse effort in Lexington, and I know not not in terms of place finish wise, but just in terms of the way I perceived the runs. Very disappointing runs for him, but he had a decent allowance victory at Churchill on Preakness Day, and then on Belmont weekend, or on the Sunday after the Belmont Stakes, he was second to Matt win. So he has some upside for him. He's another horse that maybe, if they want to revert to what they did with him earlier on in his career, which is having him forwardly placed. He did set the pace in the Kentucky Jockey Club. Didn't really work out for him, but, they could do that in this race, but I don't really think it's that likely. And outside of that, again, he's, less of a filler than some of the other horses in here, but at the end of the day, he is very much a filler, much like One Time Willard is. Now we're going to move on to the number 5 horse, King of Hollywood, another horse who's a filler in this race. He lost a local prep, the Pegasus, by a mile. He was running in Claiming Company earlier on in this year. He was 9th in the Rushaway at Turfway, his only other stakes effort aside from that local prep, the Pegasus. He's not going to win this race, and once again, just a filler, not to sound like a broken record. We're going to move on now to White Abarrio, and I'm kind of chuckling when I'm saying White Abarrio. As most of you folks probably know, White Abarrio was my Kentucky Derby pick, and that did not work out very well for me in the Kentucky Derby with him. And White Abarrio, we learned a lot about him in the Ohio Derby last time out. White Abarrio looked really good in his first 2 efforts in the year, the Holy Bull and the Florida Derby. But there was a problem or a red flag always in the back of my mind in those 2 races, and that was he kind of won those races by circumstance. In the Holy Bull, simplification stumbled really badly at the start, and in the Florida Derby, I should say, and I might have said the Fountain of Youth earlier. I do want to correct myself. I didn't mean to say the Florida Derby there, but in the Florida Derby, I feel like Charge It may have been the better horse in there, just in terms of the way he was very green down the stretch and everything there. Maybe in hindsight, Charge It with time and development, probably if he has another start into him going into the Florida Derby, wins that race. And that was something that was in my mind, but I picked him in the Kentucky Derby because I thought that it was a race where it was going to set up for him. And I actually did believe that he was a really good horse in winning the Florida Derby there. And poor Kentucky Derby run, you can kind of, make up, try to find reasons for it. It was a bad run for him, but he was wide in there. There are reasons to discount the Kentucky Derby for him. But last time out in the Ohio Derby, he just got beat on the spot by Tawny Port, who on the day was better. And I don't really see a reason why he's not going to be beat on the spot once again by a better horse. So I'm not going to be picking him in this spot, and I'm not going to use him really at all in this race either. Now we're going to move on to the will-be favorite in this race. He's not the morning line favorite right now, but the will-be favorite. That's, of course, Jack Christopher. Another horse that I have been wrong on. This is a week of horses that I was very wrong on. And Jack Christopher was a horse I did not like coming out of. I didn't like him out of his maiden effort. Didn't pick him in the Champagne. Eric and I both picked against him in the Breeders' Cup. You can go back to our Breeders' Cup show last year where we were talking about him before he came out of the Breeders' Cup. We didn't like him. Of course, he came out of there, so that's null and void. Picked against him in the Pat Day Mile, and he finally, belatedly earned my respect again. I fully admitting this. I was very late to the party with that, but I finally came around on him in the Pat Day Mile. And then last time out in the Woody Stevens, I have to say from a personal level, one of the most impressive things I've ever seen on the racetrack. I'm sure some of the listeners out there know I had the opportunity to watch some of the races on the Belmont Stakes card when I was reporting at it with Radio Hofstra University. I had the ability to watch the races in the winner's circle, and Jack Christopher walked past me in the winner's circle after winning the Woody Stevens in the manner that he did. He was not even blowing. They looked like they could put him in the gate again, and he could go around again and maybe even further in that. It was a very impressive sight to see after the race, and that was the thing that really sold me on him specifically for this race. I have questions about his ability to get distance, whether or not he wants to go this far, but I'm going to throw those out and just go with Jack Christopher because he seems to be purely superior in talent. And even if he is a sprinter type, Monmouth is a track that plays very well to sprinters or sprinter types in this race running very well. An actual sprinter won this race as recently as 2011. That was Coyle for Bob Baffert in 2011. Coyle was a sprinter. He was a closer, but he was a closing sprinter. And he was able to win the Haskell. And I think, different. Jack Christopher's not going to win it the same way that Coyle won it. But I think Jack Christopher, if Coyle can win the Haskell, an archetype like Coyle, Jack Christopher can win the Haskell as well. So Jack Christopher is going to win the Haskell. He's my pick in there. And we'll move on to the final horse in this race, and that's Benevengo. The other, I guess you could say, local horse in this race. He's coming out of a allowance victory at Monmouth last time. The start two back was in the Long Branch Stakes. That's his only prior stake start. He was fourth in that race and had a couple races at Tampa in the first two starts of his career. I don't think he's the worst play from a value perspective. Again, he's going to have to take a big step up here, but as someone who doesn't like Cyberknife, doesn't like Howling Time, doesn't want anything to do with White Abarrio, Benevengo is going to be some kind of a price in this race. Again, I don't know what kind of price, but if you're looking to make some kind of money in this race, he's going to be, I'll put it out there. He's the horse who's going to hit the board. If any horse hits the board in this race at a price, he's going to be the one to do it. I'm going to use him at the bottom of my trifecta. Now, my trifecta is going to be super chalky and an original Jack Christopher over Taiba. Why that way? Well, I laid it out with Jack Christopher. Why am I including Taiba in there? Well, you'd have to go back to 1999 to find the last time that Bob Baffert didn't run 1-2, or first or second, I should say, in the Haskell. And 1999, he was third in that race. So he has never missed the board when running horses, or he's never finished out of the money running horses in the Haskell, and not since 1999 has he had a horse finish worse than second. So Tabe is going to finish in the top two there. And then obviously Benevengo, my little for ha-has, will finish in the money horse in this race. I'm picking him third in here. Maybe we'll get some kind of a decent price on him. Maybe he'll hit the board in here. We'll see what happens. Hopefully we were able to help you out with something in here. Although, as I said, this is a very one-dimensional race. Be sure to check out the links below in the description. Subscribe to Racing Rundown if you haven't, and be sure to join us for our preview that we will have of the King George later on this week. Have a good one.